Hello, CIS41A. In this video, I am re-recording the lab 2. Wanted to touch base with you on how to complete the lab. As my previous my video did not have all audio that we needed. So in this lab, we are going to gather some additional intelligence and doing recon based on Canvas, and you can take a look at that. So to access the lab, you can download the document in Canvas. And what we'll do is we will go through the steps together so that way we have a clearer picture on what we're doing. Let me access. So in our document, we would begin with looking at some of the tools that we're going to be using today. And so when we're using our tools today, we're going to use a container, which is integrated by using Docker. And in order for Kali Intelligence Suite to work, you need to have a container. And inside that container, you are going to need database, which we are going to be installing Postgres SQL, along with additional applications that we can perform as part of the Kali Intelligence Suite or KIS. And in that suite, you would see that you would have access to some of the applications. It's able to also pull public websites. You probably have heard of haveibeenpwned.com, where you can check if your information is on the dark web. We will also use some of the tools to be able to gather some intelligence against our target. So when we start this, we need to first download Kali Linux, the latest version, and we are going to use the virtual machine. So coming back to your browser, you can visit the website or you can simply search. For example, I can open Google and I can search for Kali virtual machine download, and that's going to take you to the result for Kali Linux. We're going to go ahead and click Get Kali. And on the right-hand side, you will be able to find the virtual machines that you need. So we're going to click the recommended button. And the VM that we're going to be using for the class is going to be here using VirtualBox. Keep in mind that if you're using the computer outside of the classroom or your own system like your laptop or your desktop at home or another computer that is not inside our classroom, you need to make sure that you install VirtualBox app. And also you need to install 7-zip. You can use WinRAR to extract, but it's probably best to use 7-zip as the virtual machine file is zipped using 7-zip. And how do I find these applications? You can simply look for VirtualBox, one word, download, and you can find the downloads website provided by Oracle. We would visit the link. And based on the computer that you have, you are going to install the appropriate packages. So first you have to download them and be able to install them. So if I have a Windows PC, I would click this file. If I have Mac OS with the M1, M2 chips, I would click this file to download. If you have the older Mac OS using an Intel processor, you would click this file and so on. So if you have Linux distribution like Chromebook and or other Linux distribution like Ubuntu, you would be able to check out these files. Now, in the case where if you are running into application error, if the current version doesn't work out for you, you need to uninstall the current version and you need to go to the website, like how we would download a VirtualBox application. On the right-hand side, on the bottom, you would find the VirtualBox older build. And you would click this link and it's going to take you to the list of the older version of VirtualBox application. I would recommend looking for the ones that are currently actively maintained. So usually they maintain the previous 2 version. So you can roll back one version like 7.1 or 7.0. But again, you need to uninstall the ones that didn't work for you and be able to install the new one, or the older version, by re-download and install. But every time you uninstall and install applications, it's best to reboot your computer, so that way you would have appropriate updated information on your application list. So again, these are the older builds. So if you're running into error with the newest version, uninstall it, restart your computer, and be able to install the prior version. And you can find that on VirtualBox website, and on the right-hand side, you would find the previous releases. In addition, I think we talked about 7-zip. So because the virtual machine is compressed using 7-zip, so we would just search for 7-zip download, and we would be able to find the download information here. Now, when you look through the list, if you're using Windows 10, Windows 11, you can download the 64-bit. And if you're using an older version like Windows 7, that's 32-bit, you would need to download the 32-bit. But for most of us, we would be using 64-bit. And then if you're using Mac OS, you can just download this particular package. And then there are other variations. So please make sure that you read the description based on the download that you need. And then you can go through the installation once it's downloaded, making sure that you have 7-zip and VirtualBox available before you start extracting the Kali virtual machine. So I had downloaded my Kali, and it comes down as a compressed file, and you can see that it is showing with the 7-zip symbol, or you would see a zipper symbol on your file. That means that it is compressed. You cannot open the folder and play the virtual machine when it is compressed. It will generate an error. So if you're using Edge, make sure that you save your download first and then go find your download. So I suggest using Chrome browser when you download Kali, so that way it automatically saves it to the downloads folder. Otherwise, you're going to have a hard time finding it or loading it accordingly. Okay. And we run into a lot of these problems in class, as some of you just use Edge browser and don't save and try to open your file within the temp folder, and that doesn't work. So again, use Chrome browser, download your Kali VirtualBox file. Make sure that it is in the downloads folder and save there. Once you have downloaded it, you are going to right-click, show more applications, click that option. And if you installed 7-zip, you would see that on the list. If you haven't, you need to download and install it. So we're going to select 7-zip and then extract files. Once you extracted the files, you're going to find an unzipped or a non-compressed folder. It doesn't have the 7-zip symbol or the zipper symbol. This is where your Kali virtual machine is going to be. Do not open the one with the compressed symbol. We want to open the one that is not compressed. So we're going to go ahead and double click the folder and its subfolder. We're going to see that there are 2 files. We're going to select the VirtualBox, which is the blue icon file. I'm going to open that up. Now, when you do this, it's going to load it to your VirtualBox player. It's not yet played. Now, in the lab instruction, it tells you that you need to give it more processor and more RAM. So by default, your virtual machine has limited processor and RAM. And how can I see that? Once it's on your playlist here, you are going to click Settings. And depending on your computer, now not all computer would have enough processor to configure like what we had seen in the lab. If you have a number of processor, let's say a quad core, you cannot give your quad core to the virtual machine because you are going to need some of the core to play your virtual machine on your host computer. So as I'm using a system that has many cores, I'm able to configure that. So again, you're gonna go ahead and select this option and click setting. Once you select your virtual machine and click setting, we're gonna go to system. And you see that by default, it's only gonna allow 2,000, approximately 2,000 meg, which is 2 GB of RAM. We can up this number to 4 gigs so that way our virtual machine is going to be faster. So you simply clear out the number here and type in 4,000. Now that means that we had increased the RAM allocation on our computer, our host system, and give more RAM to the virtual machine. Then we're gonna click our processor tab. This is where we can increase our core. So I currently am using a system that has 16 core. So by default, the virtual machine only uses 2. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna clear out this number and we're going to type in 4. And you can also use the arrow key to increase the number of core. Keep in mind that you do need to have some leftover core for your host machines. So if you have a quad core, you cannot increase it to 4 because you need at least a couple of core for your host machine to play the virtual machine. So we want to make sure that we think about that when we change the setting. So after I had increased this, and I can always go back to motherboard tab to check my RAM, processor tab to check my core. I'm going to click OK. And once I'm happy with my setting, I'm going to go ahead and click start, and I'm going to let the virtual machine boot. Now, if you run into error here, that means that you did not load the extracted file accordingly. We're going to go ahead and right click and make sure that you remove only the middle option, not remove all. It's going to delete all the files that you have downloaded for your virtual machine. And then what you need to do is re-extract your file, locate it first and re-extract it and save it to your downloads folder, and then repeat the steps. So what I did here was I reconfigured my virtual machine once I loaded to my player, which is VirtualBox. And then once my virtual machine start, I'm going to go ahead and log in using Kali, Kali, and the same thing. So with that, I had completed lab 3. I mean, step 3 of the lab. Then once we have our VM loaded and logged in, we're gonna first open up our terminal and we're gonna increase our privilege, because in order to run some of the reconnaissance tools in Kali, you need to have higher privilege than your regular user, which is the Kali user inside Kali Linux. So we are gonna open up our terminal. And we are going to run a command called sudo su. Sudo su means super user do super user. So when you do that, you're going to elevate your user account to a root user. And it's going to prompt you with the password. Type in the password. Now, when you're using command line in Linux or Windows, always remember to look at who you are currently and where you are, right? The path that you're in and the user account that you're in. In the case that you close the terminal, it's going to bring you back to the regular user, and then you have to elevate your privilege again. So keep in mind that you always need to look at who you are logged in as, right? And I logged in as Kali and I elevate my privilege. So now I am using the system as a root user. And all the files that I save is going to be in the directory home and Kali. That means that it is going to be inside this folder that you see on the desktop. That's probably equivalent to what you see in Windows documents. And so we want to make sure that we know where we are and who we are logged in as. So I am on as a root user, and it shows you that it is in red right here. So differentiate that. The first thing that you should do whenever that you're using Linux is you should always push updates. This is going to allow you to have the latest installation packages, source code that is provided or released for the Linux OS. So if you don't do that, you are going to run into a problem down the line. And I suspect that some of the updates for the students that ran into problem with the later steps did not come down properly. So in that case, you should always go back and re-update your system, even if you downloaded some of the later virtual machines or the OSs that you're using. You should always run update. So we're going to do a sudo apt update. You can also use sudo apt-get updates. Apt-get is an Ubuntu command where sudo apt update works for all Debian Linux. And it's going to take about a minute for it to download depending on your connection. And then what I'll do after that is I'm going to install my Docker. Docker is going to allow us to have a container, and you want to have a container when you're doing testing, especially security testing, is that you have a control environment. Think of it like it would have a folder or a directory, and in that your applications and its output is going to exist. So here, I have finished my update, so I'm going to run the next command. And in Kali, you can copy and paste as well. So we're just going to type sudo apt install, and we want to have the option yes. If you don't have the Y, what will happen is it's just going to ask you, are you sure you want to install? And then we're going to use docker.io. And it's going to take a minute or so to pull the packages and do the installation. Once you install your Docker, then you are going to use the system control command. But again, we need to make sure that we are at the super user, even though we're on as root. I put that so that way in the case if you're not, you should be able to access it as well. We are going to enable the Docker immediately as soon as it gets installed. So when we run this next command, it's going to enable your container. And I'm going to go ahead and copy this. And I'll show you, you can go back to your terminal here, right click and paste selection. And making sure that it is a double dashes. So it tells me that, yes, it already synchronized for the service, and it enabled my Docker. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the Docker command once I enable my Docker, and I'm going to go ahead and pull the latest version of KIS or Kali Intelligence Suite. This is going to allow me to integrate the applications within my container so that way I can run some reconnaissance steps. So we are going to use these commands. And it would take a few minutes to get this down depending on your connection. Again, it's going to download individual applications in that suite. And because it's incorporating many applications, we are going to have to set up a database for our input output, the results that we're going to get for each of the application to be stored onto a database within our container, which is the Docker. Now, this process can be a little slower if you have a slower connection, but keep in mind that when you pull the entire suite, all of the application needs to come down. So we have to be patient with that. So we will let it go. While it's doing that, we're going to take a look at the next command. So once we have the suite downloaded and installed, we are going to use the Docker command, and we're going to pull. That means we're going to download and install the latest Postgres for our SQL, for our SQL applications so that way we can integrate our database. So basically the next command is going to allow us to get our database started. Now, when you do the pull, it's still going to extract the files and to be able to install, because a lot of these are compressed. So you gotta let it go. Now, if you have dual core, if you don't change the setting at the beginning of our lab, you tend to see that it's going to be a little slower. But we don't want to increase all the core too high. We want to keep some for our host system, like I mentioned. So you just only going to need based on what you're using your virtual machine for. Then once we have our database, after we complete step 7, then we're going to create a folder or a directory for our result from our Kali Intelligence Suite. It's always a good idea to keep all your scan output organized. So we want to make sure that we set up folders accordingly or directories so that way we can find the information quickly. If you don't, you will find that sometime if you have a lot of data, it's going to be harder for you to distinguish some of the data or to be able to go back and retrieve some of the data if you're not organized. So just make it a habit where if you're using a specific application, create a directory for it and to keep your data output so you can come back to it at a later time. And after we create a directory, we are going to use a wget. And this allows us to visit the website that is noted here, so the URL that you put. And we are going to pull a YML or YAML file. And we're going to also create that file for the Docker inside the directory that we created in the last step. This file is important. That's going to allow you to have the secret file and to be able to run some of the additional intelligence gathering tool in the subsequent step. If you read the documentation, it needs this particular file to be able to set up. So with that, what we'll see is we are going to proceed in the later steps where it's able to output some of the things. So if you are not successful in some step, what will happen is you should repeat the prior step in order to get through the next step. And because all of these steps are sequential and it's required for the exercise, if you skip a step, what will happen is you are going to run into error down the line. So as you can see, right, I'm almost coming to the end of my extraction and download for the pool that I had requested to get KIS installed, and I'm done here. I'm going to go ahead and now next I'm going to pull the database component, which is the Postgres. And you want to read the documentation, and they usually show you how you can set things up. Can I use other type of database? Well, if the application is supporting a certain type of database, it's best that you use that database instead of trying to integrate other type of SQL and be able to have to adapt some of the additional package for dependencies. So at this moment, I'm running step 7 and I pull the latest version for Postgres, and it tells me that it is downloaded. And then once I have the database, I'm going to go ahead and do a make directory mkdir, and you want to do a till and then /.kis. This is for the application directory that for our Kali Intelligence Suite. And then you can always use the ls command to check to see if that folder was created or if that directory is created. Once we're done making the directory, we are going to download from this URL our YML file, and we are going to also place that file as compose YML inside our application folder inside our container. So copy both of those lines, and we're gonna paste. And it shows you here, so read the output, right? Making sure that we are successful with that. Once that's done, I'm going to make a secret file. So we're gonna install first pwgn. So that's gonna give us the generator. Okay. So it tells you the requirement, everything is good to go there, nothing needs to be restarted. And then after we have installed pwgen, we're gonna use that command and we're going to create a text file for our Postgres. And we are going to place that inside our directory. And this is gonna be our secret file. And then once that's created, we're going to update the path, because remember that we have now the directory. So we are going to update the path for our YML file. So make sure that we copy the entire line that goes to the next line here. So and then once we have updated the path, we're gonna now start the Docker environment. Remember that earlier we enabled the container as Docker, but now once we set everything, then we are gonna start it. So make sure that we have the entire command. And it's gonna ask you, do you want to start this? We're gonna type in Y for yes and press enter. And then we're gonna continue, press Y and enter. So making sure that you have successfully execute step 11 in order to proceed to step 12. If you have error in step 11, you need to repeat it and do step 12, okay? So I have successfully completed that here. Then I will go ahead and execute step 12. So now we're going to initialize our database. And if I'm getting an error, let's see how I'm getting an error here, right? What we're going to do is we're going to repeat step 11, or you can up arrow key and repeat the last command. Okay, and see how now it's done. Then I'm going to execute my database initialization. So sometimes it's gonna take a couple of tries. So if you're getting an error like what I had here, repeat the previous step, making sure that your Kali suite comes down and there is database created for it. And then you're gonna redo step 12. So 11, 12, sometimes you have to repeat these together. Okay, so at this point, I can screenshot showing that my database has initialized successfully. And then what we're gonna do is we are going to obtain more information with the help option in our container. So when you do a -H, that's going to give you the help. And it's gonna open up your CLI, which is command line interface for that particular application if you're using a certain switch. So for example, I can use the the command, right, with an option that is shown to be able to perform scan, to create a workspace, which we will be doing next. And our workspace is like an area, a storage area that's going to be dedicated to our application results. So once you look at the options and you determine what you want, you can look at email or company. We're going to run the next command here, which allows you to create a workspace called new WS. And when you create a workspace, it's going to take a storage area and give it a name that you had given it, which is new WS. And what we're going to do is we are going to we're going to look at some of the, I'm going to change this to making sure that this is the URL here. So your target is going to be added into the URL. And that target needs to be added to the workspace as we see here. So we're going to run this next command after we had made our workspace and making sure that we add the target. So you might have a public IP address, which you can add here, or you can have a full domain name. Oh, sorry, that it did not like. So it cannot be a second level domain. So we're just gonna do a scanme.org. But your target needs to go here. Let me take out that. Mm. I had a space there. Okay, so now we're successful making sure that there is no space. It's not a second level domain. So if we put in the entire URL of this one, what will happen is it's not going to take because this is a second level domain. It's a child domain. It can only perform the scan against the target if it is the first level domain. So no extension to that domain. You can also use an IP address. So at this point, once I have added my target to my workspace, then I'm going to activate all of the application or the packages inside the suite for the scan. Keep in mind that, remember that these are double dashes. So want to make sure that we are going to use double dashes for this one. Okay, so we're going to copy this entire thing. And you can remove some of the individual application inside this list depending on what you need. So this is just an example for you to see. So if I'm pulling a lot of DNS information, I can include these tools. But if I don't need, I'm going to go ahead and take them from delete them from the list. So, and so this process is gonna take at least half an hour or more, depending on your target response. And also, if you have other things that are blocking it. So what you will see is that it's going to go, and you have to let this go for a little bit of time in order to have the result. If you don't let it populate the result, you are going to run into error when you are looking at the next couple of commands. Just think about it. If you don't have anything to look at and you're trying to look at the result, if you don't have any result, how are you going to look at the result? So, now you see that it's activating my CLI, right? And while that happens, I'm going to go ahead and let it go for a little bit of time. So I'll come back to step 19 through 22 from part A. I'll just let it run for some short time now because it's producing the thread and it's trying to pull. Okay. Now, if you want to access the result, where we can run the next command here after we get out of the CLI, okay? So let's wait 20 minutes for this part. So while that happens, I'm gonna go ahead and open another terminal and I will start part B. Notice that I'm back to the Kali user. So I'm gonna go ahead and upgrade my account to root. So we can do a sudo su and type in your password. For part B, let's talk about this while we wait for the other part to finish. Part B, we're gonna use recon-ng. This is a common tool and it's mostly for your web reconnaissance. It's written in Python. You can refer to the documentation for additional information. Recon-ng is good if your target is a web application, a web server, etc. It is very similar to Metasploit framework, and so you are going to see some of the tools integrated in recon-ng that is like using marketplace and things like that. It's going to be very similar. So once I'm elevated as root, and you can run it as Kali, you just got to do sudo recon-ng and so on. So I'm going to go ahead and do recon-ng, and keep in mind that this is already pre-installed in Kali Linux virtual machine. If you're using other releases of Linux, you have to install it if it's not there. So how do I know if a certain application is there? You can do a which command and you can check. And if it's there, it's going to give you the directory showing that it is installed inside these folders. So we're going to now know that our recon-ng is available. We're going to run it. And we're going to use the help option. This allows us to see what additional switch or option that we can add. Like similar to what you've seen with KIS, you will start with making a workspace. You can use a -r and then add a file name so that way you can load a set of commands. So I can have a text file that I would write a list of commands to be able to execute. That will automate and streamline the process. Additionally, there are stealth version. So you can make it a little bit less noisy where if you want to be a little bit more passive. So we can have the stealth option. So these are some of the basic command from the help manual page. Okay, so once we have that, we're gonna go ahead and run the actual application. So it's gonna open up the command line interface, similar to what you've seen in the last KIS suite. So we're gonna do a recon-ng without any option, and we're gonna call up the application. And it's gonna take a few seconds to load. Remember that I'm scanning using the Kali Intelligence Suite all together concurrently with what I'm trying to do here. So while that's happening, I'll go ahead and minimize that. We'll come back here. So now my application is open. Notice that you see the application command line interface, and it's in the default path. So what we'll do is we're going to use the application command, which is what you've seen in the help option previously. We're going to make a workspace called test WS for recon-ng. So you're going to execute workspaces, create test WS. And now what you see is it places us inside that workspace or that application. So remember what I said, always know where you are. So that way you're gonna check to make sure that you are in the right area. Otherwise, you're gonna have a hard time finding your data or the things that you need afterwards. So now what we're going to do is we are going to access Marketplace. And Marketplace is where we would pull the modules for it to execute a certain type of search. So for example, I can use a Marketplace to bring in the module for looking for our domain, which is, it could be like scanme.org or a certain type of domain. So what we'll do is we're gonna go ahead and do a Marketplace help and type this link. Okay. Now, if you are having an error here where it doesn't show your Marketplace, go back and update your virtual machine once again. Additionally, you need to make sure that you have all of the other steps in place prior to this. So likely that if you didn't update properly or did not pull the Python packages that you need, it's going to generate an error. And both times I've done this, I did not get errors. So I want to make sure that you understand that Marketplace, because it's pulling these source code, right, from a repository. Want to make sure that we have the proper updates and languages and applications that we need. Okay, so once we have the Marketplace help, it's going to give us the access to Marketplace. So we're going to do Marketplace, search domain. This is going to allow us to look for domain. And then we are going to install specific module for our recon-ng, and the one that we're using is Hacker Target. Hacker Target is pretty cool because it's allowing you to set up your target. You can use IP address or domain. So you're going to go ahead and do Marketplace, install Hacker Target. Oh, let's see. Yeah, I'm not getting the last module, so let's repeat. Oh. And see. Let me exit. Let me try to update it. Everything is good. Let's reopen recon-ng. And then we are going to say workspaces, test WS. Let's make a new. We'll do a help. So when the help, what we'll see is we can load the modules, we can do workspaces, create test WS. And I'm gonna put one because I already made the last one as test WS. And then we're gonna do marketplace help. And then we're going to do marketplace, install, let's see, search domain. Okay. So it should be okay now. So what I did was I updated it and then I recreate a new workspace, and then I run the help option, and then I run the marketplace search domain. And you want to see this. This should be good. Earlier, it did not pull all of the information. So sometimes you have to do that. You have to make sure that if you're running into no module found like this, right? You are going to get back, run an update, and then get back to the application recon-ng. So I just do a search domain and it should be, it loads everything correctly. And then I'm gonna go ahead and do marketplace install hacker target. So let's see. Yeah, sometimes you gotta give it a second attempt to load the module, because if the module is occupied, let's say, by another application, it will not be able to see. So when you're getting a red error like this, just redo that step or go back, retrace your step, and then repeat. Okay, so once we have the hacker target, we're gonna load that modules. And notice that when we load the module, it puts that into the path of the application. And then we're going to, like the last one where we add, now we're gonna source it for the URL. So you can do options, set, source, and the site. And you can use, let's say that I'm gonna use scanme.nmap.org, right? So once you set the target, we're gonna go ahead and change this to something that's more allowable. And then once you set your source, which is your target, you are going to type in info, and it's just gonna give you the detail about your source for your input. And it tells me here that by default, the domain from the domains where it is not null. So we have the information for the source input, and then we're gonna go ahead and type in input. So we know that we have an input. So what will happen is the application will automatically input as we execute the run. So that way it's going to probe the target that you had set, which is the source, and then give you some kind of output. So once we have the input, we're going to execute the run. And it says one host found, gives you an IP address. There's no geolocation. This is your host, no region information. But if the domain has that information, it's going to give you the information so we can screenshot that. Okay. And then after that, we're going to do a show host. And it shows you here, right? What's the host IP? Now, if you have a range of hosts, it's going to list that as it accumulate the information from a group of hosts if you want. So for 37.8, you should be able to answer that. Now, once we're done with the recon-ng, screenshot this, write down the information for your lab. We're going to go ahead and type exit to get out of the application, and we're back to our terminal pop-up. Coming back to the other, right, I'm going to jump back to the end of part A as I already finished part B. I'm going to go ahead and run the bash here. Now, you are going to have to cancel. So I can type in exit like this. And then that's going to allow me to finish, right? It terminates all the thread. Otherwise, it will continue, and this could go on for hours. And in reality, we want to get this to completely done instead of doing an exit, right? Oh. So we're going to do a Docker. Let's copy this. And we're going to execute the bash. So once you execute the bash, it's going to take you to the bash shell for the application, which is what you see here. And then I'm going to pull the report. Keep in mind what I said earlier was if you didn't completely obtain all the data, you won't be able to access some of the things that we're looking for, like second level domain, the scope, the company information. That might be blank, and the output is going to throw error if it's not able to populate or find the information to populate your CSV file. So as you can see, right, it's not able to find that information from the CSV file because the data doesn't exist, as I terminated early. If I let it run for a while, if the target has the information that I need, that I specify, it's going to populate my CSV file. And when I run this command, the shell command, it's going to pull up the CSV file and be able to give me the result. So, right, so I had put the note there. We would need to take a screenshot for our lab. And then we're going to exit the shell. Type in exit, and we're back to command prompt. As you can see, that this is because there are many tools and a lot of the data needs to be populated. You are going to have to wait for it, and also how the target is responding to the probe request from the suite that you're running. That's why you're going to see that, this process is going to take a while, and it will, if you terminate it early, you won't get the result that you need. Okay, so I'm done with both parts. I finished obtaining or looking at potential information there, and I did the recon-ng. So what's left is I'm going to go ahead and shut down my virtual machine. So I'm going to do a shut down now to close that out. And then I'm going to go ahead and answer these questions. So what did you learn about KIS in relation to intelligence gathering? We talked about in this exercise, I showed you how you need to set up a container for it, as it has a set of applications that would run. And with that, we have to also set up a database for the output or the result of the scan through those applications. So it would require a little bit of the setup. And then with that, we would need storage and processor power to be able to accumulate the data that we need from the scan. And then we looked at how when we use this, we would run that into a bash shell command, and then be able to wait for it and obtain the output information. The second question says, what did you learn about recon-ng? We know that recon-ng is pre-installed in Kali Linux. We would use the help option to look at some of the additional switches or option that we can use with our command. In both applications, we need to create a workspace, and then using that workspace for recon-ng, we're going to load the module. And in the case that if it's generating, it cannot locate the module, you need to repeat the step. And then once we have the module that we need, we can install Hacker Target, which allows us to use this particular module with its resources or its source code to be able to set up our target, which is known as source. Then we are going to set up the information and the input values, and then run the application so that way it would automatically input for the probe against our target. And then when we're done, it's going to give us the information about the hosts, which are the servers or that belongs to the target, and the IP addresses information. So this allows you to gather the information about the target system, at least the public IP based on the domain name, and also, if there's geolocations or other things, it would be able to apply there. So I hope that this clarifies some information about Lab 2 of CIS41A. Let me know if you have any questions. And I hope that you successfully run these applications in your virtual machine and be able to explore its capability for cybersecurity analysis. Thank you for watching my video, and see you next time.